looked darkly in at him through the thin frost, almost in separate stars that gathers on the pane in empty rooms. What kept his eyes from giving back the gaze was the lamp tilted near them in his hand. What kept him from remembering what it was that brought him to that creaking room was age. He stood with barrels round him at a loss, and having scared the cellar under him in clumping there, he scared it once again in clumping off, and scared the outer night, which has its sounds familiar, like the roar of trees and crack of branches, common things, but nothing so like beating on a box. A light he was to no one but himself, where now he sat, concerned with he knew what. A quiet light, and then not even that. He consigned to the moon, such as she was, so late arising, to the broken moon, as better than the sun in any case for such a charge, his snow upon the roof, his icicles along the wall to keep, and slept. The log that shifted with a jolt once in the stove disturbed him, and he shifted, and eased his heavy breathing, but still slept. One aged man, one man, can't keep a house, a farm, a countryside, or if he can, it's thus he does it of a winter night. There is a singer everyone has heard, loud, a midsummer and a midwood bird, who makes the solid tree trunks sound again. He says that leaves are old, and that for flowers midsummer is to spring is 1 to 10. He says the early petal fall is past, when pear and cherry bloom went down in showers on sunny days a moment overcast, and comes that other fall we name the fall. He says the highway dust is over all, the bird would cease and be as other birds, but that he knows in singing not to sing. The question that he frames in all but words is what to make of a diminished thing.
Some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. From what I have tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction ice is also great and would suffice.
Before man came to blow it right, the wind once blew itself untaught, and did its loudest day and night in any rough place where it caught. Man came to tell it what was wrong. It hadn't found a place to blow. It blew too hard. The aim was song, and listen how it ought to go. He took a little in his mouth and held it long enough for north to be converted into south, and then by measure blew it forth. By measure, it was word and note. The wind had meant to be, a little through the lips and throat. The aim was song, the wind could see. Once when the snow of the air was beginning to fall, we stopped by a mountain pasture to say whose colt, a little Morgan, had one forefoot on the wall, the other curled at his breast. He dipped his head and snorted at us, and then he had to bolt. We heard the miniature thunder where he fled, and we saw him, or thought we saw him, dim and gray, like a shadow against the curtain of falling flakes. I think the little fellow's afraid of the snow. He isn't winter broken. It isn't play with the little fellow at all. He's running away. I doubt if even his mother could tell him, sakes, it's only weather. He thinks she didn't know. Once when the snow of the air was beginning to fall, we stopped by a mountain pasture to say whose colt, a little Morgan, had one forefoot on the wall, the other curled at his breast. He dipped his head and snorted at us, and then he had to bolt. We heard the miniature thunder where he fled, and we saw him, or thought we saw him, dim and gray, like a shadow against the curtain of falling flakes. I think the little fellow's afraid of the snow. He isn't winter broken. It isn't play with the little fellow at all. He's running away. I doubt if even his mother could tell him, sakes, it's only weather. He thinks she didn't know. Where is his mother? He can't be out alone. And Now he comes again with a clatter of stone and mounts the wall again with whited eyes and all his tail that isn't hair up straight. He shudders his coat as if to throw off flies, whoever it is that leaves him out so late, when everything else has gone to stall and Ben ought to be told, come bring him in. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, miles to go before I sleep. The house had gone to bring again to the midnight sky a sunset glow. Now the chimney was all of the house that stood, like a pistol after the petals go. The barn opposed across the way that would have joined the house in flame had it been the will of the wind, was left to bear forsaken the place's name. No more it opened with all one end, for teams that came by the stony road to drum on the floor with scurrying hoofs and brush them out with the summer load. The birds that came to it through the air at broken windows flew out and in, their murmur more like the sigh we sigh from too much dwelling on what has been. Yet for them the lilac renewed its leaf, and the aged elm, though touched with fire, and the dry pump flung up an awkward arm, and the fence post carried a strand of wire. For them there was really nothing sad, but though they rejoiced in the nest they kept, one had to be versed in country things not to believe the Phoebes wept.
These pools, that though in forests, still reflect the total sky almost without defect, and like the flowers beside them chill and shiver, will, like the flowers beside them, soon be gone, and yet not out by any brook or river, but up by roots to bring dark foliage on. The trees that have it in their pent-up buds to darken nature and be summer woods, let them think twice before they use their powers to blot out and drink up and sweep away these flowery waters and these watery flowers from snow that melted only yesterday.
The shattered water made a misty din. Great waves looked over others coming in and thought of doing something to the shore that water never did to land before. The clouds were low and hairy in the skies, like locks blown forward in the gleam of eyes. You could not tell, and yet it looked as if the shore was lucky in being backed by cliff, the cliff in being backed by continent. It looked as if a night of dark intent was coming, and not only a night, an age. Someone had better be prepared for rage. There would be more than ocean water broken before God's last put out the light was spoken. He is that fallen lance that lies as hurled, that lies unlifted now, come snow, come dew, come rust, but still lies pointed as it plowed the dust. If we who sight along it round the world see nothing worthy to have been its mark, it is because like men we look too near, forgetting that as fitted to the sphere, our missiles always make too short an arc. They fall, they rip the grass, they intersect the curve of earth and striking break their own. They make us cringe for metal point on stone. But this we know, the obstacle that checked and tripped the body shot the spirit on further than target ever showed or shone.
You'll wait a long, long time for anything much to happen in heaven beyond the floats of clouds and the northern lights that run like tingling nerves. The sun and moon get crossed, but they never touch, nor strike out fire from each other, nor crash out loud. The planets seem to interweave in their curves. but nothing ever happens. No harm is done. We may as well go patiently on with our life and look elsewhere than to stars and moon and sun for the shocks and changes we need to keep us sane. It is true the longest drought will end in rain. The longest peace in China will end in strife. But it wouldn't reward the watcher to stay awake in hopes of seeing the calm of heaven break on our particular site and personal laws. That calm seems certainly safe to last tonight.
My own strategic retreat is where two rocks almost meet, and still more secure and snug, a two-door burrow I dug. With those in mind at my back, I can sit forth exposed to attack as one who shrewdly pretends that he and the world are friends. All we who prefer to live have a little whistle we give, and flash at the least alarm we dive down under the farm. We allow some time for guile and don't come out for a while, either to eat or drink. We take occasion to think. And if after the hunt goes past and the double-barreled blast, like war and pestilence and the loss of common sense, if I can with confidence say that still for another day and even another year I will be there for you, my dear, it will be because though small as measured against the all, I have been so instinctively thorough about my crevice and burrow. Out of the mud 2 strangers came and caught me splitting wood in the yard. And one of them put me off my aim by hailing cheerily, "Hit them hard." I knew pretty well why he dropped behind and let the other go on away. I knew pretty well what he had in mind. He wanted to take my job for pay. Good blocks of oak it was I split, as large around as the chopping block, and every piece I squarely hit fell splinterless as a cloven rock. The blows that a life of self-control spares to strike for the common good, that day giving a loose to my soul I spent on the unimportant wood. The sun was warm, but the wind was chill. You know how it is with an April day. When the sun is out and the wind is still, you're 1 month on in the middle of May. But if you so much as dare to speak, a cloud comes over the sunlit arch, a wind comes off a frozen peak, and you're 2 months back in the middle of March. A bluebird comes tenderly up to a light and turns to the wind to unruffle a plume, his song so pitched as not to excite a single flower as yet to bloom. It is snowing a flake, and he half knew winter was only playing possum, except in color he isn't blue, but he wouldn't advise a thing to blossom. The time when most I loved my task, these two must make me love it more by coming with what they came to ask. You'd think I never had felt before the weight of an axe head poised aloft, the grip on earth of outspread feet, the life of muscles rocking soft and smooth and moist in vernal heat. Out of the woods, 2 hulking tramps, from sleeping God knows where last night, but not long since in the lumber camps. They thought all chopping was theirs of right. Men of the woods and lumberjacks, they judged me by their appropriate tool. Except as a fellow handled an axe, they had no way of knowing a fool. Nothing on either side was said. They knew they had but to stay their stay, and all their logic would fill my head, as that I had no right to play with what was another man's work for gain. My right might be love, but theirs was need. And where the two exist in twain, theirs was the better right. Agreed. But yield who will to their separation. My object in living is to unite my avocation and my vocation as my 2 eyes make one in sight. Only where love and need are one, and the work is play for mortal stakes, is the deed ever really done for heaven and the future's sakes. Snow falling and night falling, fast, oh fast, in a field I looked into going past, and the ground almost covered smooth in snow. but a few weeds and stubble showing last. The woods around it have it, it is theirs. All animals are smothered in their lairs. I am too absent-spirited to count. The loneliness includes me unawares. And lonely as it is, that loneliness will be more lonely ere it will be less. A blanker whiteness of benighted snow, with no expression, nothing to express. They cannot scare me with their empty spaces between stars, on stars where no human race is. I have it in me so much nearer home to scare myself with my own desert places. Some of you will be glad that I did what I did, and the rest won't want to punish me too severely for finding a thing to do that, though not forbid, yet wasn't enjoined and wasn't expected, clearly. To punish me over cruelly wouldn't be right, for merely giving you once more gentle proof that the city's hold on a man is no more tight than when its walls rose higher than any roof. You may taunt me with not being able to flee the earth. You have me there, but loosely as I would be held. The way of understanding is partly mirth. I would not be taken as ever having rebelled. And anyone is free to condemn me to death if he leaves it to nature to carry out the sentence. I shall will to the common stock of air my breath and pay a death tax of fairly polite repentance. Never ask of money spent where the spender thinks it went. Nobody was ever meant to remember or invent what he did with every cent.
As I came to the edge of the woods, thrush music, hark. Now if it was dusk outside, inside it was dark. Too dark in the woods for a bird by sleight of wing to better his perch for the night, though he still could sing. The last of the light of the sun that had died in the west still lived for one song more in a thrush's breast. Far in the pillared dark, thrush music went, almost like a call to come into the dark and lament. But no, I was out for stars. I would not come in. I meant not even have asked, and I hadn't been. The land was ours before we were the land's. She was our land more than 100 years before we were her people. She was ours in Massachusetts, in Virginia, but we were England's, still colonials, possessing what we still were unpossessed by what we now no more possess. Something we were withholding made us weak until we found out that it was ourselves we were withholding from our land of living, and forthwith found salvation in surrender. Such as we were, we gave ourselves outright. The deed of gift was many deeds of war to the land vaguely realizing westward, but still unstoried, artless, unenhanced, such as she was, such as she would become. To start the world of old, we had one age of gold not labored out of mines, and some say there are signs the second such has come, the true millennium, the final golden glow to end it. And if so, and science ought to know, we well may raise our heads from weeding garden beds and annotating books to watch this end deluxe. We dance round in a ring and suppose, but the secret sits in the middle and knows. Harrison loves my country too, but wants it all made over new. He's Freudian Viennese by night. By day, he's Marxian Muscovite. It isn't because he's Russian Jew, he's Puritan Yankee through and through. He dopes on Saturday pork and beans, but his mind is hardly out of his teens. With him, the love of country means blowing it all to smithereens and having it all made over new. I don't believe the sleepers in this house know where they are.
They've been here long enough to push the woods back from around the house and part them in the middle with a path. And still I doubt if they know where they are, and I begin to fear they never will. All they maintain the path for is the comfort of visiting with the equally bewildered. Nearer in plight their neighbors are than distance. I am the guardian wraith of starlit smoke that leans out this and that way from their chimney. I will not have their happiness despaired of. No one, the other one says, no one, not I, would give them up for lost simply because they don't know where they are. I am the damper counterpart of smoke that gives off from a garden ground at night, but lifts no higher than a garden grows. I cotton to their landscape, that's who I am. I am no further from their fate than you are. And the other one says, they must by now have learned the native tongue. Why don't they ask the red man where they are? They often do, and none the wiser for it. So do they often ask philosophers who come to look in on them from the pulpit. They will ask anyone there is to ask. In the fond faith, accumulated fact will of itself take fire and light the world up. Learning has been a part of their religion. And the other one says, if the day comes when they know who they are, they will know better where they are. They are too sudden to be credible, either to themselves or the onlooking world. And the other one says, listen, they murmur, talking in the dark. Putting the lamp out has not put their thoughts out. Let us pretend the dewdrops from the eaves are you and I eavesdropping on their questions and see if we can tell the bass from the soprano. A smoke and mist eavesdropping on a haze. Than smoke and mist, who better can appraise the kindred spirit of an inner haze? Much as I owe the passers of the past, because their to and fro has cut this road to last. I owe them more today, because they've gone away, and not come back with steed and chariot to chide my slowness with their speed and scare me to one side. They have found other scenes for haste and other means. They leave the road to me to walk in, saying naught, perhaps, but to some tree inaudibly in thought. From you the road receives a priming coat of leaves, and soon for lack of sun the chances are in white it will be further done, but with a coat so light the shape of leaves will show beneath the spread of snow, and so on into winter, till even I have ceased to come as a footprinter, and only some slight beast so mousy or so foxy shall print there as my proxy. Columbus may have worked the wind, a new and better way to wind, and also proved the world a ball. But how about the wherewithal? Not just for scientific news had the Queen backed him to a cruise. Remember, he had made the test, finding the East by sailing west. But had he found it, here he was, without one trinket from Ormuz, to save the Queen from family censure for her investment in his venture. There had been something strangely wrong with every coast he tried along. He could imagine nothing barrener. The trouble was with him, the mariner. He wasn't off a mere degree. His reckoning was off a sea. And to intensify the drama, another mariner, Da Gama, came just then sailing into port from the same general resort. But with the gold in hand to chauffeur his claim, it was another offer. Had but Columbus known enough, he might have boldly made the bluff that better than Da Gama's gold, he had been given to behold the race's future trial place, a fresh start for the human race. He might have fooled them in Madrid. I was deceived by what he did.
If I had had my way when young, I should have had Columbus sung as a god who had given us a more than Moses' exodus. But all he did was spread the room of our enacting out the doom of being in each other's way, and so put off the weary day when we would have to put our mind on how to crowd yet still be kind. For these none too apparent gains, he got no more than dungeon chains and such small posthumous renown, a country name for him, a town, a holiday, as where he is, he may not recognize for his. They say his flagship's unlaid ghost still probes and dents our rocky coast with animus approaching hate, and for not turning out a strait, he has cursed every river mouth from 40 north to 40 south. Someday our Navy, I predict, will take in tow this derelict and lock him through Culebra Cut, his eyes as good or bad as shut to all the modern works of man and all we call American. America is hard to see, less partial witnesses than he in book on book have testified they could not see it from outside or inside either, for that matter. We know the literary chatter. Columbus will be sure to miss all telltale signs of artifice, and should he wonder why a shore that was impervious before now opened up, thank some earthquake for having given him the break. He may not pay much gratitude, but let him show his haughty stern to what was never his concern, except as it denied him way to fortune hunting in Cathay. He will be starting pretty late. He'll find that Asiatic state is about tired of being looted while having its beliefs disputed. His can be no such easy way Cortez and Pizarro made.
O ocean sea, for all your being vast, your separation of us from the old that was to make the new world newly great will only disappoint us at the last if it should not do anything foretold to make us different in a single trait. This, though we took the Indian name for maize and changed it to the English name for wheat, it seemed to comfort us to call it corn. And so with homesickness in many ways, we sought, however crudely, to defeat our chance of being people newly born. And now the sea is lost by airplane. Our sailors ride a bullet like a boat. Our coverage of distance is so facile, it makes us to have had the sea in vain. Our moat around us is no more a moat. Our continent no more a moated castle. Grind shells, O futile sea, grind empty shells for all the use you are along the strand. I cannot hold you innocent of fault. Spring water in our mountain bosom swells to pour fresh water on you from the land till you have lost the savor of your salt. I pick a dead shell up from where the kelp lies in a windrow, brittle, dry, and black, and holding it far forward for a symbol, I cry, do work for women, all the help we ask of you. Grind this, I throw you back into a lady's finger ring or thimble. The ocean has been spoken to before, but it had no thought of paying heed to taunt of mine. I knew a place to go where I need listen to its rote no more, nor taste its salts, nor smell its fish and weed, nor be reminded of them in a blow. So far inland, the very name of ocean goes mentionless, except in baby school, when teacher's own experiences fail her, and she can only give the class a notion of what it is by calling it a pool and telling them how Sinbad was a sailor. Man, and his wife and God. Place a fair oasis in the purest desert. A man sits leaning back against a palm. His wife flies by him looking at the sky. And man says, you're not asleep? No, I can hear you. Why? I said the incense tree's on fire again. You mean the burning bush? The Christmas tree. I shouldn't be surprised, she says. And he says, the strangest light. And she says, there's a strange light on everything today. And he says, the myrrh tree gives it. Smell the rosin burning? The ornaments the Greek artificers made for the Emperor Alexius, the Star of Bethlehem, the pomegranates, the birds, seem all on fire with paradise. And hark, the gold-enameled nightingales are singing. Yes, and look, the tree is troubled. Someone's caught in the branches. So there is. He can't get out. He's loose. He's out. And she says, it's God. I'd know him by Blake's picture anywhere. Now what's he doing? And he says, pitching throne, I guess, here by our atoll. And she says, something Byzantine. The throne's a plywood flat, prefabricated, that God pulls lightly upright on its hinges and stands beside, supporting it in place. And she goes on, says, perhaps for an Olympic tournament or court of love. And he says, more likely royal court or court of law, and this is Judgment Day. I trust it is. Here's where I lay aside my varying opinion of myself and come to rest in an official verdict. Suffer yourself to be admired, my love, as Wallace says. And she says, or not admired, go over and speak to him before the others come. Tell him he may remember you, you're Job. And God says, oh, I remember well. You're Job, my patient. How are you now? I trust you're quite recovered and feel no ill effects from what I gave you. And Job says, gave me in truth. I like the frank admission. I am a name for being put upon. But yes, I'm fine, except for now and then a reminiscent twinge of rheumatism. The let-up's heavenly. You perhaps will tell us if that is all there is to heaven, escape from so great pains of life on earth. It gives a sense of let-up calculated to last a fellow to eternity. Yes, by and by. But first a larger matter, God says. I've had you on my mind 1,000 years to thank you someday for the way you helped me establish once for all the principle there's no connection man can reason out between his just deserts and what he gets. Virtue may fail and wickedness succeed. 'Twas a great demonstration we put on. I should have spoken sooner had I found the word I wanted. You would have supposed that one who in the beginning was the word would be in a position to command it. I have to wait for words like anyone. Too long I've owed you this apology for the apparently unmeaning sorrow you were afflicted with in those old days. But it was of the essence of the trial. You shouldn't understand it at the time. It had to seem unmeaning to have meaning. And it came out all right. I have no doubt you realize by now the part you played to stultify the Deuteronomist and change the tenor of religious thought. My thanks are to you for releasing me from moral bondage to the human race. The only free will there at first was man's, who could do good or evil as he chose. I had no choice, but I must follow him with forfeits and rewards he understood, unless I liked to suffer loss of worship. I had to prosper good and punish evil. You changed all that. You set me free to reign. You were the emancipator of your gods, and as such I promote you to a saint. And Job says, you hear him, Thyatira, we're a saint. Salvation in our case is retroactive. we're saved, whatever else it means. And she says, well, after all these years. And then he says, this is my wife. She says, if you're the deity, I assume you are. I'd know you by Blake's picture anywhere. And God says, the best, I'm told, I ever have had taken. And she says, I have a protest I would lodge with you. I want to ask you if it stands to reason that women prophets should be burned as witches, whereas men prophets are received with honor. And Job says, except in their own country, Thyatira. And God says to her, you're not a witch. And she says, no. Have you ever been one? And Job says, sometimes she thinks she has and gets herself worked up about it, but she really hasn't. Not in the sense of having, to my knowledge, predicted anything that came to pass. And then she says, the witch of Endor was a friend of mine. And God says, you wouldn't say she fared so very badly. I noticed when she called up Samuel, his spirit had to come. Apparently a witch was stronger than a prophet there. And she said, but she was burned for witchcraft. That is not a record in my notebook, God says. Well, she was, and I should like to know the reason why. And God says, there you go asking for the very thing we've just agreed I didn't have to give. Then it says the throne collapses, but he picks it up and this time locks it up and leaves it. And then God goes on and says, where has she been the last half hour or so? She wants to know why there is still injustice. I answer flatly, that's the way it is, and bid my will about it, like Macbeth. We may as well go back to the beginning and look for justice in the case of Segub. And Job says, oh Lord, let's not go back to anything. And God says, because your wife's past won't bear looking into it? In our great moment, what did you do, madam? What did you try to make your husband say? Let's not live life over. I don't care. I stood by Job. I may have turned on you. Job scratched his boils and tried to think what he had done or not done for the poor. The test is always how we treat the poor. It's time the poor were treated by the state in some way, not so penal as the poorhouse. That's one thing more to put on your agenda. Job hadn't done a thing, poor innocent. I told him not to scratch. It made it worse. If I said once, I said 1,000 times, don't scratch. And when as rotten as his skin, his tents blew all to pieces, I picked up enough to build him every night a pup tent around him so it wouldn't touch and hurt him. I did my wifely duty. I should tremble. All you can seem to do is lose your temper when reason-hungry mortals cry out for reasons. Of course, in this abstract high singular, there isn't any universal reason, and no one but a man would think there was. You don't catch women trying to be Plato. Still, there must be lots of unsystematic, stray scraps of palliative reason that wouldn't hurt you to vouchsafe the faithful. You thought it was agreed. You shouldn't give them. You thought to suit yourself. I've not agreed to anything. And Job says, there, he says, you go to sleep. God must await events as well as words. And she says, I'm serious. God's had eons of time, and still it's mostly women get burned for prophecy, men almost never. God needs time, Job says, just as much as you or I to get things done. Reformers fail to see that. She'll go to sleep. Nothing keeps her awake but physical activity, I find. Try to read to her and she drops right off. And God says she's beautiful. Yes, she was just remarking she now felt younger by 1,000 years than the day she was born. That's about right, God says. I should have said, you got your ages reversed when time was found to be a space dimension that could, like any space, be turned around in. Yes, both of us, we saw to that at once. But God, I have a question, too, to ask. My wife gets in ahead of me with hers. I need some help about the reason problem before I am too late to be got right as to what reasons I agree to waive. I'm apt to string along with Thyatira. God knows, or rather you know, God forgive me, I waived the reason for my ordeal, but I have a question even there to ask in confidence. There's no one here but her, and she's a woman. She's not interested in general ideas and principles. And God says, what are her interests, Job? Which women's rights? Humor her there, or she will be confirmed in her suspicion you're anti-feminist. You have it in for women, she believes. Kipling invokes you as the Lord God of hosts. She'd like to know how you would take a prayer that started off, Lord God of hostesses. And God says, I'm charmed with her. Job says, yes, I could see you were. But to my question, I am much impressed with what you say we have established between us, you and I. And God says, I make you see? It would be too bad if Columbus-like you failed to see the worth of your achievement. You call it mine? Job says. We groped it out together. Any originality it showed, I give you credit for. My fault is truth or metaphysics, long the world's reproach for standing still in one place, true forever, while science goes self-superseding on. Look at how far we've left the current science of Genesis behind. The wisdom there, though, is just as good as when I uttered it. Still, novelty has doubtless an attraction. And Job says, so it's important who first thinks of things. I'm a great stickler for the author's name, God says. By proper names I find I do my thinking. And then Job's wife says, God, who invented earth? And Job says, well, what, still awake? And God says, any originality it showed was of the devil. He invented hell. False premises that are the original of all originality, the sin that felled the angels, Woolsey should have said. As for the earth, we groped that out together, much as your husband Job and I together found out the discipline man needed most was to learn his submission to unreason, and that for man's own sake as well as mine, so he won't find it hard to take his orders from his inferiors in intelligence, in peace and war, especially in war. And Job says, so he won't find it hard to take his war. God says, you have the idea. It's not much I can tell you. And then Job says, all very splendid. I am flattered, proud to have been in on anything with you. It was a great demonstration, if you say so. Though, incidentally, I sometimes wonder why it had to be at my expense. It had to be at somebody's expense, you know. Society can never think things out. It has to see them acted out by actors, devoted actors at a sacrifice. The ablest actors I can find. Is that your answer? Come, he says, Job says to him, come, after all these years, you never told me, you know, to satisfy me. I'm curious, and I'm a grown-up man. I'm not a child for you to put me off and tantalize me with another oh because. You'd be the last to want me to believe all your effects were merely lucky blunders. That would be unbelief and atheism. The artist in me cries out for design. Such devilish ingenuity of torture did seem unlike you, and I tried to think the reason might have been some other person's, but there is nothing you were not behind. I did not ask then, but it seems as if now, after all these years, you might indulge me. Why did you hurt me so? I am reduced to asking flatly for the reason, outright. And God says, I tell you, Job, all right, don't tell me then, if you don't want to. I don't want to know. But what is all this secrecy about? I fail to see what fun, what satisfaction a God can find and laughing at how badly men fumble at the possibilities when left to guess forever for themselves. The chances are, where there's so much pretense of metaphysical profundity, the obscurities of fraud that covers nothing. I've come to think no so-called hidden values worth going after. Get down into things, it will be found there's no more given there than on the surface. If there ever was, the crypt was long since rifled by the Greeks. We don't know where we are or who we are. We don't know one another, don't know you, don't know what time it is. We don't know, don't we? Who says we don't? Who got up these misgivings? Oh, we know well enough to go ahead with. I mean, we seem to know enough to act on. It comes down to a doubt about the wisdom of having children after having had them. So there is nothing we can do about it but warn the children they perhaps should have none. You could end this by simply coming out and saying plainly and unequivocally whether there's any part of man immortal. Yet you don't speak. Let fools bemuse themselves by being baffled for the sake of being. I'm sick of the whole artificial puzzle. And Job's wife says, you won't get any answers out of God. And God says, my kingdom, what an outbreak. Job is right. Your kingdom, yes. Your kingdom come on earth. Pray tell me, what does that mean? Anything? Perhaps that earth is going to crack someday like a big egg and hatch a heaven out of all the dead and buried. One simple little statement from the throne would put an end to this fantastic nonsense. For instance, she says, answer this question. For instance, is there such a thing as progress? Job says there's no such thing as earth's becoming an easier place to save his soul in, except as a hard place to save his soul in, a trial ground where he can try himself and find out whether he is any good. It would be meaningless. It might as well be heaven at once and have it over with. And then God says, two pitching on like this at once confuse me. One at a time, please. I will answer Job first. I'm going to tell Job why I tortured him, and trust it won't be adding to the torture. I was just showing off to the devil, Job, as is set forth in chapters 1 and 2. Job takes a few steps pacing, and God says, do you mind? God eyes him anxiously. And Job says, no, I mustn't. 'Twas human of you. I expected more than I could understand, and what I get is almost less than I can understand. But I don't mind. Let's leave it as it stood. The point was, it was none of my concern. I stick to that. But talk about confusion. How is that for a mix-up, Thyatira? Yet I suppose what seems to us confusion is not confusion, but the form of forms, the serpent's tail stuck down the serpent's throat, which is the symbol of eternity, and also of the way all things come round, or of how rays return upon themselves, to quote the greatest Western poem. Yeah. Though I hold rays deteriorate to nothing, first white, then red, then ultra-red, then out. And then God says, Job, you must understand my provocation. The tempter comes to me, and I am tempted. I'd had about enough of his derision of what I valued most in human nature. He thinks he's smart. He thinks he can convince me it is no different with my followers from what it is with his. Both serve for pay. Disinterestedness never did exist, and if it did, it wouldn't be a virtue. Neither would fairness. You've heard the doctrine. It's on the increase. He could count on no one. That was his lookout. I could count on you. I wanted him forced to acknowledge as much. I gave you over to him, but with safeguards I took care of you, and before you died I trust I made it clear I took your side against your comforters in their contention that you must be wicked to deserve such pain. And Job says, God, please, enough for now. I am in no mood for more excuses. And he says, what I mean to say, God says, your comforters were wrong. And Job said, oh, that committee. And he says, I saw you had no fondness for committees. Next time you find yourself pressed onto one for the revision of the book of prayer, put that in if it isn't in already. Deliver us from committees. Twill remind me. I would do anything for you in reason. And Job says, yes, yes. You don't seem satisfied. I am. You're pensive. Oh, I'm thinking of the devil. You must remember he was in on this. We can't leave him out. Oh, no, we don't need to, God says. We're too well off. Someday, Job says, someday we three should have a good old get-together celebration. Why not right now? And Job says, we can't without the devil. Oh, the devil's never very far away, God said. He, too, is pretty circumambient. He has but to appear. He'll come for me, precipitated from the desert air. Show yourself, son. I'll get back on my throne for this. I find it always best to be upon my dignity with him.
We hope you've enjoyed this program from Harper Audio. To order additional cassettes or to receive a complete catalog of Harper Audio and Cadman titles, please call us at 1-800-331-3761. That's 1-800-331-3761. Thank you.